Hello and thanks for watching this new edition of World Insight. Great to see you again. I'm James Chow in Beijing, and as always we've got a 30-minute program right ahead. In that we'll bring you full analysis on all the stories in the headlines. Well, here's our first story today. As the financial crisis shakes up the planet's #1 power, the United States, the leaders of the world's biggest emerging markets, Brazil, Russia, India and China, met Tuesday this week for their first formal summit. In the Russian city of Yekaterinburg, the so-called Bric nations discussed new ways to reshape the global financial system while seeking a louder voice on the global stage.
8 years ago, when Goldman Sachs strategist Jim O'Neill coined the word Bric, he may not have thought it would enter into common use. Bric refers to Brazil, Russia, India and China. Goldman Sachs pointed to their rapid development. By 2050, the firm argued the combined economies of Bric could eclipse the combined economies of the current richest countries of the world. 8 years later, Bric is well on his way to proving Jim O'Neill correct. The world's biggest emerging market powers met for the first time in the Russian Ural city of Yekaterinburg.
Today, now we have a very important event. It is the first full-scale summit of Bric countries. It's obvious that it has become necessary to meet in this format so that we can talk not through our colleagues, our foreign ministers, or other ministers, but so that the four of us can discuss the situation of the world economy.
An academic acronym metamorphosed into a pressure group. Chinese analyst Chen Fengying identifies the driving forces of the first Bric summit.
Goldman Sachs did not argue that the Bric would organize themselves into an economic bloc or a formal trading association like the EU. But the meeting signals that the four Bric countries have been seeking to form an alliance and thereby converting their growing economic power into greater geopolitical clout.
The four Bric countries represent about 25% of the habitable territory on the planet and around 40% of its population. To date, Bric accounts for around 15% of global gross domestic product and 13% of the global trade volume.
Though critics say the coupling of the four countries does not come from any natural alignment of economic and political interests, still the financial crisis brought them together to deepen mutual cooperation and craft a united front on repairing the global financial system.
Though this summit in Russia is their first, Bric ministers have met many times. In May last year, also Yekaterinburg, foreign ministers discussed possible guidelines for future cooperation.
The meeting increased the mutual understanding among us while promoting cooperation and dialogue. Four countries have seen rapid economic growth in recent years, playing a significant role in world economic growth. We all agree cooperation among us benefits our own economies.
The economies of the Bric nations are complementary. India and China are population-intensive economies with huge resource demand, while Brazil and Russia are resource-intensive nations with raw materials to sell. And trade between these countries is improving despite the global downturn. Last month, the Brazilian president paid his second state visit to China since taking office.
As President Hu Jintao knows, in the first 4 months of this year, China has become the top trading partner of Brazil.
Moreover, China is also India's first trading partner and Russia's third. Besides trade ties, the four countries have united to reshape the world financial system. In November last year, their finance ministers got together to demand a major role in negotiations with the developed countries.
We reached the conclusion that the emerging nations, the Bric countries, the G4 countries, need to reform and reorganize the world's financial system. This international financial system, which was created in Bretton Woods, needs to be reformed.
Bretton Woods refers to the international monetary system adopted in 1944. It established rules for rebuilding the post-war economic order. The agreement signed in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, made the gold-backed U.S. dollar the world's reserve currency. Two organizations were set up to help govern the international monetary system, the International Monetary Fund and the chief agency of the World Bank Group.
The Bretton Woods system created at that time reflected the interests of developed countries. Now the world economic landscape has greatly changed with the rising economic weight of the emerging markets. The four countries united due to discomfort about the dominance of the dollar as the world's reserve currency and unfairness in the IMF, in which the U.S. enjoys virtual veto power.
In the IMF, the BRIC countries hold less than 10% of the votes despite accounting for 15% of the global economy. Before the BRIC summit, China said it is willing to contribute up to $50 billion to the IMF through a purchase of IMF bonds. Brazil and Russia also said they would buy $10 billion worth each. India is expected to follow suit.
I think the decision by the BRICS to buy IMF bonds should not be seen simply as a desire to diversify their foreign currency portfolios, but as a show of muscle. The four countries want the IMF to reflect the weights of the countries in the global economy and want more say on the global stage.
The four leaders issued a joint statement after their summit. It focuses not just on the reform of the financial system, but also the reform of the UN. It says, we reiterate the importance we attach to the status of India and Brazil in international affairs and understand and support their aspirations to play a greater role in the United Nations. China and Russia are permanent members of the UN Security Council. India and Brazil want seats too. Analyst says this summit shows a tentative community is taking root. The next question is, can it become a political institution?
Now BRIC is more like a community of common interests. The four countries will bond together as long as developed countries rule the world financial system. Close economic interests will definitely promote political cooperation among the four.
As the creation of economists, there may be an element of the surreal in this grouping. But from an economic notion to a political motion, the leaders have made it real. Changing the architecture of current financial system takes time, but the four countries are determined to do it, brick by brick. And more importantly, they are now doing it, hand in hand.
Well, these four countries may find that they have as many differences as they do in common, but when they join together to share that one voice, the world stopped to listen. Hope for the four is high, but let's not forget that their economic clout is still limited. The BRICS are not the saviors of the world economy, but rather survivors. And dealing with this crisis needs cooperation between developed and developing countries. Coming up next, we'll be back with Iran's post-election shake-up. That's coming right up here. Stay with us.